Welcome to the HardCIDR Networking Academy. My name is LePrevost, and today we will be talking about VTP version 3. The core concept of VTP hasn't changed since VTP version 2, so be sure to watch my earlier video about VTP's basic operation and configuration. And with that, let's get started. If you go looking around the web, you'll probably notice that there really isn't much in the way of documentation on VTP version 3. For an update that is supposed to change how people view VTP, it isn't very widespread. Why is that? Well, it was added in a relatively newer version of iOS, 12.2 revision 52. And I think that people still have a bad taste in their mouths from previous versions of VTP. Anyway, let's get into why version 3 is so great. The first reason is that they kind of fix the network crippling design problem that I showed you in my last video. They do this by adding a fourth VTP mode called the primary server mode. I'll get into how that works in a minute. Version 3 also adds support for multiple spanning tree, private VLANs, and extended range VLANs, which is really just bringing VTP into this decade. There are also some much needed security and authentication enhancements thrown in there as well. In my last video on VTP, I said that VTP servers were the bosses of the network. Well, now these bosses have to answer to one single super boss in the network. The primary server VTP mode is pretty much the CEO of the VTP domain. His version of the VTP database is the authoritative one. This presents a problem though. What happens if you make a change on a server mode switch? Will it still propagate the change throughout the network like it did before? No, server mode switches have effectively been stripped of any importance. They have the same authority as client mode switches now. The only switch in the network that can do any editing to the VLAN database is the primary mode switch. The primary server status can be transferred between switches though, so you can always just transfer the role to another switch if you need to edit VLANs. Let's take a look at how this is configured firsthand. Okay, so here's the basic diagram that we've been working with in the lecture series to this point. Switch 1 and Switch 2 are currently running VTP version 2, so let's go ahead and change them over to version 3 for our purposes. Okay, changing over a VTP version 2 switch to a VTP version 3 switch is actually very easy. If we go under the global config mode and then type it, all we have to type in is VTP version 3. And version 3 is automatically enabled on the switch. Actually, look at this log message that just came up. Old version 2 VLAN configuration file detected and read OK. Version 3 files will be written in the future. So it detected that it's coming from a version 2 configuration file, and it's actually converting them over to version 3 right now, and version 3 will be written in the future. So this is good. It means version 3 has successfully been implemented on switch 1. And let's go ahead and make switch 1 the primary switch in this VTP domain. To do that, all we have to do is exit out of config mode, and under enable mode you type in VTP primary, and it says this system is becoming the primary server for feature VLAN. And it will do this for actually several seconds, 10 to 15 seconds, before becoming the primary server. What it is, it's checking the rest of the VTP domain to see if there is another primary server out there, and it'll tell you, it says no conflicting VTP 3 devices found. Do you want to continue? I'll hit enter there, and we are now the primary server. Here you go. This MAC address has become the primary server for the VLAN VTP feature. Now if we go over to switch 2, you can see how easy, once again, this is. We'll turn version 3 on for switch 2. And let's try actually editing, because, okay, switch 2 is now in, if we do a show VTP status, it should be in server mode by default. So we can see the VTP operating mode is server. The VTP version running is now VTP version 3. Let's see if we can add a VLAN to the VLAN database. So let's add VLAN 66. You can see now that VTP VLAN configuration is not allowed when device is not the primary server for the VLAN database. So even though it is in server mode, Switch 2 cannot add, delete, or modify VLANs in any way. It needs to become the primary server. So let's say we needed to add a VLAN, the VLAN 66 on the switch. We would actually have to go under and type in VTP primary. It would have to become the primary server, and then we can add VLAN 66 to the domain. Gotta wait a couple seconds here. And now we can go under global config mode and add our VLAN 66. And as you can see, switch 1 will come up with a log message that says that this other switch has become the primary server for the VLAN VTP feature. So it loses its primary status, and switch 2 gains the primary status. So like I said before, there's only one primary switch in the VTP domain now, but it can be transferred among switches fairly easily. So let's go on to our next topic, which is it's security in VTP version 3. VTP version 3 also includes a ton of much needed security enhancements. VTP versions 1 and 2 will happily give you the VTP password in plain text with the command show VTP password. That's not very secure at all. But now you can store the VTP password in the VLAN database as a hash for added security, which is an awesome addition in my opinion. You also have to type the VTP password into the prompt if you want to change a switch to the VTP primary mode, which protects against attackers or maybe even the occasional intern who has compromised one of your switches. You can also turn VTP completely off on the switch or switch port level, again for added security. When you start looking at the feature list for VTP version 3, you start to realize how dated version 2 really was. Version 3 adds a lot of housekeeping features, such as support for extended range VLANs, multiple spanning tree, and private VLANs. All of these features aren't that new, but it's nice to finally see them implemented in VTP. I'll probably cover these features in more depth later on when I get to private VLANs, multiple spanning tree, and etc. But I don't think they really deserve a configuration example in this video. So I know what you must be thinking right now. Okay, VTP version 3 is pretty cool, but there must be a catch somewhere. So how hard of a transition will it be going from VTP versions 1 and 2 to VTP version 3? Luckily, it won't be that bad at all. VTP version 3 is completely backwards compatible with versions 1 and 2 with a couple disclaimers. Because of how version 3 now works, any VTP updates coming from a version 1 or 2 switch will be ignored. But any changes to the version 3 switches will extend out to our version 2 switches. Cisco highly recommends using version 3 throughout your network to prevent weirdness. Another change in VTP version 3 is that pruning is now enabled on a switch-by-switch basis, so keep that in mind when you turn VTP pruning on a version 1 or 2 switch, as it won't propagate across the domain. If you turn on VTP pruning in version 3, you have to do it manually on every switch now. So let's take a quick look at our diagram and how VTP version 2 and 3 interact in the same environment. Okay, let's get back to our switch diagram here. I discovered this kind of quirk between VTP versions 2 and 3 when I was filming this video. It kind of threw me for a loop, so I'll show you guys. As you can see, the two switches on the left, switch 1 and switch 2 are running VTP version 3, while the two switches on the right, switch 3 and switch 4, are running VTP version 2. As you can see, switch 2, I just changed it to version 3, so it has a small revision number, revision 10, while VTP version 2 switch 3, has a higher revision number from playing with it in the earlier videos, so it had revision 12. Now, switch 2, whenever it receives an update from switch 3, will just discard any update packets that it gets from switch 3. So, switch 3 is trying to update switch 2's VLAN database. It keeps sending packets out its port, and switch 2 keeps ignoring them, even though the revision number on switch 3 is higher. Likewise, switch 2 keeps sending update packets out its port, and switch 3 keeps dropping them because switch 3 has a higher revision number than switch 2. So it's kind of an interesting scenario where neither side is going to update their VLAN database based on each other because of either legacy rules or new rules implemented in the system. So let's see how we can fix this problem and to see how changes in each database affect each switch individually. Okay, we're on switch 2 right now, which, as you know from the diagram over here, is running VTP version 3, and it has a revision number of 10. Whereas switch 3, which it's directly connected to, is running VTP version 2 and has revision number 12. So let's just confirm this with a show VTP status. By the way, I love how they completely retooled the show VTP status for version 3. It's much easier to read, gives you a lot more information. Overall, it's just nice to look at. It's aesthetically appealing to me. So as you can see, we have revision number 10. We are a primary server, so we can edit VLANs and make changes. We're running version 3. We're in the HCNA domain name, and we have pruning enabled. So let's take a look at, compare that against switch 3 and see why they're not updating each other. So we're going to run show VTP status. And again, with my comment, it's just too compact. It's not as appealing to me. Anyway, look at our configuration revision number. It's 12. Our domain names match. Pruning is enabled. It's in server mode. Remember, that's the legacy mode from version 2. So let's go ahead and see what happens when we make switch 2's revision number higher than switch 3's. Let's see if they get along and start sharing VLAN databases. So let's go ahead and actually go into global config mode, and let's make a VLAN 54, and let's make VLAN 55 and VLAN 78. Now, let's hop back over here and do a show VTP status. And you can see our configuration revision number is 12, so let's actually increment it by one more just to make sure. Create one more VLAN there. Again, we'll do show VTP status. Okay, we are on configuration revision 14. Let's hop on over to switch 3 and see if they received, okay, this is interesting, VTP protocol user notification, MD5 digest checksum mismatch on receipt of equal revision summary on trunk FA0/16 and 17. Now, despite that error message, let's see what our show VTP status is showing. Okay, we are on configuration revision 14. And let's do a show VLAN just to make sure that everything is kosher. Yep, you can see all of the VLANs that we created on switch 2, and it looks like VTP is running in this mixed environment pretty well. Now, let's see what happens if we create a VLAN over here. We'll create VLAN 25. Exit. And we do show VTP status. And we are on revision 15 now. Let's hop back over to 2. And as you can see, we're still on revision 14. We did not get that VLAN update just because version 3, VTP version 3, which switch 2 is running, is discarding any update packets sent out from switch 3, which is running version 2. So in order to enforce some of the new security policies and features of version 3 is only backwards compatible to a certain extent. Any changes to the VLAN databases of your VTP domain have to be made on a version 3 primary switch and nowhere else in your mixed environment. So with that in mind, let's wrap this video up with a couple show commands and we'll be on our way. Nothing has really changed in how you check and verify how VTP is running. But I would like to introduce a new show command for VTP, and that's the show VTP counters command. And what that does is it shows how many VTP packets the switch has received, how many it's sent out, and all kinds of other detailed information when you really get into the nitty-gritty troubleshooting of VTP. You know, if you're trying to figure out if it's a bad trunk link or whatever else that's preventing the VTP packets from going out or being received by the switch. Well, that wraps up the VLAN trunking protocol for good. Tune in next time to learn about Ether Channel. Once again, on behalf of the HardCIDR Networking Academy, I would like to thank you for viewing.